Hello, 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 beautiful people, and welcome back to another episode of the USL Show. I want to open this off because I haven't seen you guys since last week, and you haven't heard from me since last week. And I wanted to tell you that we raised $350 for the Carter Payne Fund for Tormenta, which if you don't know, that means we sold a lot of shirts and super proud of you guys. Thank you. Since it was so successful, not immediately, but we will be unveiling another one later in a few months. After everything arrives and we get time to let our wallets recuperate and all that kind of stuff, we know that this was successful enough that we want to do another batch. We're super excited about it. We cannot thank you enough. Sending that money over and being in touch with the people with Tormenta, it really made us excited, and we want to keep doing stuff like this. So if you're listening to this and your club has a foundation that they have or they are actively a part of, let us know. We want to promote as many USL based charities. Now, even if it's just, oh, we are, team in Washington State and we have a canned food drive that we do every year, but it's your club is doing it, tell us. Please let us know. We want to be involved. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. I know $350 doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're talking about what we're doing with South Georgia Tormenta with the Carter Payne Fund, that's legit about a third of a kid's scholarship in order to play soccer for free. You have helped make a kid's dream come true. So thank you so much. That's enough of my jabbering. John, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I feel like collectively, like as a podcast, we're all in kind of recuperation mode right now, but I'm happy to be here talking soccer.
Absolutely, absolutely. Phil, you survived your airport AMA, your Q&A session. You made it back. You're alive. How are you?
I am good. Yeah, it was absolutely nuts. It's a classic case of no good deed goes unpunished. My parents live in the greater DC area, so I was in DC for work. I booked a later flight back so that I could get lunch with my mom, and that flight then got delayed almost 5 full hours, and so I arrived back in Detroit at about 11:30, 11:45. Got back home to my house about 1 in the morning. So yeah, I'm absolutely operating at a deficit still, a little bit after the weekend, but yeah, excited to be back. Obviously, just a weird weekend in USL, but some of the football on display also amazing. So I mean,
Yep.
there's some great stuff to talk about, some not so great stuff to talk about, and I'm sure we'll cover all of it.
Yeah. So I want to. Yeah, I am looking down on you. If you're not in the chat, I'm standing up while I'm doing this. I'm currently in the kitchen. I was talking to my wife, who might be walking behind me. I don't know. And then I was like, I want to eat dinner. And then I was like, hey, we have a podcast we have to run. And so there's not going to be as much jabbering from me tonight, which some of you are going, thank God. And that's because I'm going to be on the ones and twos. But I wanted to go ahead and talk about and do a little segue into what Phil was referring to first, which is the bad stuff first, because we want to get hype. We want to get the good stuff going first, but of course we need to talk about the other things that happened. And look, Central Valley Fuego always seemed to have a, no pun intended, just like a fire going on there. Like they are just constantly burning. It is nothing seems to be going right. They come in, they have a training facility that's on the way. Good job, Fuego. And then they don't have enough security to separate fans from players. In which we have racial abuse allegations. Now, what I'm about to play, what we're about to play on here. So if you're audio only, to let you know what you're about to hear, is video that was taken of an altercation between Knight, who is the goalkeeper of Lexington, and a fan of Central Valley Fuego. Now, there might be language used in here. Now, there were racial abuse allegations, right? I didn't hear any particular language being used in this video, but it doesn't mean it didn't happen. So if you heard it, this is not us supporting his actions. Obviously, we are informing of what happened. We'll talk about a little bit more context after we watch it, but I want to go ahead and get straight into what we are about, basically what happened after the match.
Bro. Hey, oh shit, what the hell just happened? Wait, what just happened? Nico. Wait, what? No, Brown. Oh shit. Oh, what the fuck? No, Brown. What just happened?
Chill.
Yo. We're your fans. We're his fans.
That's crazy.
What just happened? Yo, why would he do that?
All right, before we get too far, here's what I want to start off with. I need to be careful with what I say. Let's forget about the racial abuse stuff, okay, for just a second. Let's forget about the racial abuse that was alleged. There was an altercation between player and fan, and there was zero security there to break it up. The only people that were breaking it up were other players. If racial abuse is bad, we know that. I think we can all agree. Everybody that's listening to this can agree. We are preaching to the peanut gallery here. But when we're talking about player safety, right? Where is the player safety? If you're able to have a player and a fan start an altercation where a player has hands put on him, if you're a player, no matter what race, gender, or, like sexuality, whatever you are, you're like, where am I safe? How am I safe? And then add on top of the racial abuse thing on top of that, it's just gross. It's absolutely gross. And yeah, I'm going to let you guys take that, but that's immediately where my brain went, was just the safety of the players.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're audio only, what you're missing is like a mighty shove from presumably a Fuego fan on him all night, who's a really good high-level goalkeeper. Somebody throws a water bottle back and forth. There's confusion. This is happening as Lexington is just trying to head back into the locker room, like completely out of context. It's unacceptable. I think it feeds into the pretty common perception that Central Valley isn't a serious club in a lot of ways, where time and again, in so many different areas, that team isn't up to the par that the USL should hold every organization towards. I mean, it's sad to see. I don't have a ton to add. I hope that the league takes action with this. I hope that the league takes action in terms of the racial issues in a way that so often the league hasn't, but it's unacceptable across the board.
Yeah, I mean, in any case where you have an area where there's the potential for player-fan interactions without any sort of physical barrier or any sort of, any sort of physical barrier, then you have to, like, the burden is on the club to provide the level of security that keeps this sort of incident from happening. Because there's just no, I mean, to Kaylor's point, to your point, like, there's just no scenario in which a player should have to answer to an opposing fan without any sort of any intervention from any hired security, whatever the case is. There's that interaction shouldn't be possible. And there are so many clubs in, whether it's USL 1 or the championship, where there is the potential for these sort of, like, I mean, you would almost call them like mixed zones, which is typically referring to journalists, not just random fans. But there is the potential for these kind of pitch side, like fan areas and stuff. And I mean, speaking from experience of being to a club that handles it very well, Detroit City has a lot of like pitch side fan areas, and they also police it really well in terms of managing like whether you have tickets for that area, like not allowing just like free access to certain areas. And they don't just allow fans into certain areas of the field, especially when players are trying to exit the playing field and all of that. So the bottom line is like, you can't make the excuse that like, oh, it's just it's a tough area of the stadium to control, and we have this pitch side seating or VIP areas or something like that. The burden is on you as the home team to control that. And you add in the fact that Fuego fans, there are these allegations by Lexington of racial abuse, which, I mean, that is something that has to be policed, has to be cracked down on. I hate to be the one to say that like Fuego should play in an empty stadium, because that is such a punishment for a lower league side. And there has to be a burden of proof of we've done enough to protect the players and protect our staff and protect those like, I mean, doing business on the field from these sorts of things. Because if not, they shouldn't be able to host fans at the very least, if there's not further action taken by USL on this. That you basically lose the privilege, in my opinion, to host these sorts of events when you allow this sort of thing to happen.
Yeah, and there was a point that I think was made by El Fuego Pod, which if you don't follow them, they do an incredible job at covering Fuego. And like, but what you mentioned, like be forced to play in an empty stadium, this is the same team that has lost such a connection with fans that there was a Christian Chaney supporters group to support another team. Yes, it would hurt the club, but it's not like it's going to hurt a fan base that is actively rooting against their own club. And I understand that, like groups like El Fuego Pod, right? Your heart hurts for them because access to those areas, people like that who are journalists, people like that who are covering the club, are also going to get those rights stripped away from them out of the name of security, when they should have never had that taken away from them to begin with if the club had just done their job. And then you get into the racial allegation stuff, where I do believe that last year they had a certain homophobic chant that was also done at the beginning of this year. I think that was earlier this year.
Yeah.
And you can get into the culture of the supporters. You can get into a lot of things, right? And that is a deeper conversation than I can give, obviously. Like, I'm not from that kind of area. I don't fully know the culture. That's not my culture. But I can tell you that, like, in the U.S., it's not allowed. We don't do it. And so when you compile that with racial abuse and a full-on altercation, is not a malice at the palace, but, who knows what if it doesn't turn into that.
Yeah.
Listen, Amal Knight, from all reports, is one of the nicest and level-headed guys that we've seen. I mean, we've all seen the USL hothead. We've watched every single one. I'm sure everybody has one that comes to their mind as someone who's willing to fly off the chains at any moment. Imagine if they do that to him and not Amal Knight. It gets really bad, and there's an awful issue at the USL headquarters. This could have been a lot messier for not just USL, but just Fuego entirely.
And it's a classic case of, like, I guarantee that the inciting event of that altercation is not in that video, right? Like, whatever caused Amal Knight to react that strongly to something that a supporter said isn't on video. It's the reaction that gets people hitting the record button, right? Like, that's what gets people filming. Whatever happened first isn't on tape, and that is a shame, because I think there will be some who have sort of this reaction of, hey, athletes are meant to be, they're the professionals, they're the ones who are meant to like carry themselves, like hold themselves to a higher standard. And I would just caution people like against that sort of reaction of, basically what they're saying in the video of like, oh, we're your fans, like which is just a lot. Like they're not Lexington
Right.
fans, so I don't really understand that take. And you know, I would just caution people against jumping to the conclusion that Amal Knight is just reacting strongly for no reason, because I can almost guarantee that there is something, you know, inflammatory that causes him to stick around and have that sort of reaction. So the USLPA, I mean, I will say, like, they were quick to issue a statement, and that is, I mean, if we're going to look for the silver lining in this, like the fact that there is now a players union that represents championship and League One players, that is such a benefit to making sure that and holding the league accountable when this sort of stuff happens, because like they are going to advocate for the players. They have the players' backs, and this isn't something that always existed. So it's great that the union is in place and that they have that to actually hold the league accountable and have some expectation that there's going to be a response here.
Yeah. It really sucks that we have to have this conversation about once every other month.
I know. It's like,
yeah.
Well, look, it feels like another conversation that we have at least once every other month. And now recently it feels like once a month. New record transfer. Wow. Hey, it's here. We have Milan Olowski moving on, which people who I saw a lot of comments happening in under Orange County Post are like, where's Milan Olowski? Where's Milan Olowski? He's not in the U.S. anymore. He is moving for a 6-figure fee, and like it's well deserved. And I think for a lot of people who aren't Orange County fans, he's younger than you think he is. Like, my brain says this guy who scored 34 goals in a season and a half is like almost 30 years old, because that's what it feels like every big time goal scorer in the USL is. Dude's like 23, and he's gotten his move to Europe, and it's super exciting. And Orange County is just continuing to churn out players through that academy. And I know he kind of wasn't through the academy, but he was still local through UCLA, stayed in South Cali, and then, you know, moves on. Orange County continues to get him, and continues to send him. And honestly, at this point, if you're a young player in like Southern California, why are you not trying to line up at Orange County's door? Like, forget LAFC, forget LA Galaxy. You're going to go through the Orange County system. You have Feyenoord right there, who is attached to the club. You have Rangers who are attached to the club. Oh, and by the way, you're going to get playing time. If you're good enough, you will get playing time.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
I mean, Orange County is a model right now for what every club in the USL should be striving for. You mentioned, I mean, youth in the Southern California area, but Kobe Henry was someone who came up in Florida, I want to say. Credios Indina isn't from the area. They've done a great job of recruiting nationwide. I think Olowski is a different story, but one that means a lot for where the USL is heading. This is somebody who went the college soccer route. He was deemed to be not good enough for MLS, and he ended up in Orange County's pocket. They have the connections now. They have the player development infrastructure to take someone like him with a lot of underlying talent, make that come good, and move him to a team that's in the Europa Conference League right now. Like, Nordsjælland is a team that finished second in Denmark last season. They're in it for real in Europe. They're highly considered in terms of development over there. So it's a big deal. And Olowski himself, I was able to talk to him and do an interview for Backheeled. He talked a lot about the fact that Real Salt Lake basically didn't have the infrastructure in place to support his career and give him time. He had, I mean, I don't want to be overly negative, but nothing but bad things to say about what they're doing with Real Monarchs, and the fact that you're shuttling players back and forth. The level of competition isn't there with so many academy players in the mix. And that Orange County was just night and day, and the environment they had was so productive. So, I mean, I know I said it up top, but if you're a USL team, take notes on what they're doing, talk to those personnel, and try to build something like that, because it's where this league needs to head if they want to make themselves financially viable and competitive on the field going forward.
I love this move for the reasons that you mentioned in terms of like this. Nordsjælland is a team that's consistently in the Champions League group stages. Like they often qualify for that level. You know, they're obviously they become a little bit of an also ran when they're in the fourth pot and constantly getting beat up on by like the super clubs. But they're getting that, like their players get exposure, you know, and Conference League, I think like it started as a meme and now it is like pretty well regarded as a European competition and a place for players to showcase themselves. So I think it's such an exciting opportunity for Olaski, who has been, again, unbelievable like this season. Obviously, Golden Boot winner last year in USL. And like Kaylor mentioned, he's still just 24. Like, I think he just turned 24 years old. So he's like, he is still right entering his prime essentially. And this is such a good timing for this move. And if Nordsjælland can put any sort of run together in the Conference League, like we could see some pretty big visibility and TV, you know, opportunities for Milan. I think the question is the move isn't going through till January is what I like understand. So
Yeah.
obviously he's finishing out the season with Orange County. Do you think that there was an element of, did Nordsjælland try to get this deal over the line for this year and that's why he was kind of absent, and maybe due to some, maybe it was like visa stuff. I don't really know Denmark's like immigration laws or labor laws and stuff like that, but it seems like something they were trying to get over the line, and maybe they defaulted to January because of they just ran into their transfer deadline.
Milan was somewhat hesitant about the idea of moving to another country where they don't speak English primarily. He had MLS offers that he was pondering that ultimately they basically didn't want to pay Orange County a fee, and they were offering him a salary that was frankly a little bit insulting given what he's done in the USL, which part
The
of
MLS
is
special,
MLS,
basically.
right?
The
Yeah.
MLS special of I don't want to pay for him, and also I don't want to pay him.
Right. But ultimately, the coach, Morten Carlson in Orange County, he was somebody who was a youth manager there for almost a decade. So he's got very good connections. They were able to work this out in a really amicable way. He was over in Denmark recently, but it seems like everyone's happy with him just sorting things out and going over in January.
I also think about the other side of this, not really the other side, but what about if you're Brian, where you're just like, there goes your brother? Like, I mean,
Did you know Brian played in Poland for a year? Because I did not know that.
Actually, I think I did, because I think when he was in Poland, he was playing wingback.
Okay, I think he was at Legia Warsaw, which is like a decent club. I might be wrong on that, but like, I mean, cool for the Olaskis who are just killing it. Eric Olaski was in the USL for a minute. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I think I did. I think I did know about that. Because yeah, I know wherever he was in like Europe, he was playing wingback, because I was doing like a little bit of just like background on him, and I was like, wingback? So yeah, but I mean, you're Brian, you're like, this is really cool for my brother, but it's also like, I mean, granted, it's, you never assume anybody's kind of relationship with anybody. You know, they have their own lives, obviously, but there has to be a little bit of that kind of sucks, because like your default, I'm going to hang out with this person, you know, person is kind of gone now. Like that kind of sucks on that side, which is also when we find out Nordsjælland also has bought Brian Olaski, which would be incredible.
2-for-1 deal.
Well, Brian was in OC and won a title. Then Milan joined the next season, and they finished basically last in the West. So what does that say?
Milan Olaski overrated.
Yeah.
Get your money back. Well, listen. Unless anybody has anything else they want to say, this, check out the Backheeled article. You know, let's go ahead and talk about something exciting that honestly didn't think it was ever going to happen. I thought the dream was dead, but it is not. We are leaving the Southeast USL League One. No more teams are joining the Southeast. We are going to the Northeast. We're staying on the East Coast. We are going up to Portland, Maine, not Oregon, Maine, which is the biggest city in Maine, I do believe.
Must be.
It has to be, right. Okay. But anyway, they are getting their League One team, which is just so exciting. Phil was talking about it beforehand, but I mean, they're like, we're coming to the USL logo is just incredible. And if that isn't at least an alternate logo, like you're doing it wrong, please keep that. Yeah, we are. I'm excited. I'm super excited. I mean, honestly, this is a little bit of like, not dumb, but if I am a fan of another League One team and it's fall, like the beginning or the end of fall, and I'm looking for an away day, going up to Maine when the leaves are changing colors and having a good time up there, like absolutely, I'm taking that away trip in a heartbeat. Super excited for Portland to be joining.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things that stuck out to me. First and foremost, the brand is completely amazing. Anyone who says that it's too close to Portland Timbers, get over yourself. Like, they don't own green and gold. Portland, Maine is more trees than Oregon, frankly. Maine is like the most foresty place on earth. But they've got a nice situation with their stadium where they're going to be the main tenant of a 6,000 seat stadium. They've pledged to take a fairly sizable percent of their season ticket revenue, donate it towards climate action, donate it towards DEI involvement in soccer in the community. Those are the sorts of signs you really like to see from a club when they're getting their feet on the ground there. So nothing but good things. I like it for League One also with the geographic expansion with Tacoma, or not Tacoma, whatever it is in Washington, and then Santa Barbara, but now with Portland as well.
Spokane.
Yeah, Spokane. Yeah, but just getting outside of that southeastern bubble is a big deal going forward. So love to see this get on the ground.
Yeah, the one note I have for them is when the articles published and the SEO or whatever like titles went across, it said USL to Portland, and there were plenty of people in the replies to those initial posts who assumed they meant Portland, Oregon. And I know that is like the one thing that they'll have to overcome potentially branding wise. But I similar to you, John, I love the fact that they're entering a place that, you know, in going to Maine, it does feel like differentiated in a lot of ways. Being in the Northeast, I look forward personally to, you know, we talked about their commitment to climate action. I look forward to a New England derby with Vermont Green in USL League 2, and potentially maybe Vermont moves up one of these times. But yeah, I think this is a slam dunk for USL. And like you said, the situation with the stadium, having that sorted is so important. And the fact that they're being thoughtful about a lot of the things coming in. It is basically, we want more of these sort of committed and thoughtful and intentional ownership groups. More of this, less of Fuego, essentially, is like what we're coming down to. No, all the signs are really great for Portland, Maine to be a really, really solid addition to League One and give that league a little bit to look forward to in terms of the growth and like you said, not exiting the Southeast, but expanding beyond it.
Can I tell y'all my conspiracy theory hat that came to me whenever I saw this? I feel like this was in my brain, could be completely not. This is not anything from anybody. So this is pure Caleb brain, which is normally wrong. Just keep that in mind. This feels like a step of, we believe that Pro Rel could happen to me, because imagine a promotion and you have Hartford, Rhode Island, and Maine all in the championship. And we talked about Vermont.
Yeah.
Hartford remaining in the championship. Are we sure about this?
Okay. Well, year one. It will be Portland, and it'll be Portland and Hartford. Rhode Island stays up. Shout out Conno Smith, and then eventually Hartford. Okay, Portland goes up, and
we'll see. Hartford will be in League 2 at this rate, but that's
Vermont and Hartford just switch spots.
Yeah.
By the way, Hartford with back-to-back weeks of COVID scare, and then game just gets canceled after 8 minutes for rain. That's impressive stuff.
That's wild. 8D chess.
That club can't get a win in more ways than one, I
They
guess.
can't be allowed.
Let's be honest. Like, okay, we never really talked about the Hartford at Tampa Bay thing. They still rolled out their like basically best lineup. I understand they had a couple of people that were not available on the bench. I know they had like no bench, but also it feels like half the clubs in the USL are not rolling out a full bench anyway. So
Mark Lowry has never named a full bench in his entire tenure as a head coach in USL. Like, I don't think he's ever named 7 substitutes. That's never happened.
it's in the 11. There's nothing in the name about substitutes.
He's like, this is how many players I get. Yeah. So no, I think it was overblown in terms of, and I get, if I'm Hartford, I totally get why you would advocate for that. Right. And at the same time, like, I think it was very overblown in terms of there's plenty of teams that have had to roll out, whether it be from injury or whatever. Like, it hasn't been COVID related, but like there's been plenty of teams that have had to roll out short benches and make do. And there was nothing really the emergency goalkeeper signing is the only thing that was like a mitigating circumstance. The rest of it for me was totally blown out of proportion.
I mean, they got a guy who put up like good numbers at UMass the season prior. Like, they weren't exactly struggling in net. And Tampa Bay, by the way, who they were facing the week prior, named a 3-man bench. So, like, I mean, world's smallest violin there for Hartford.
Yeah. You're just not good. Sorry. Like,
yeah. I mean, you're last place. Like, how much leeway are we going to give you there?
I don't know. I know I was sort of called out for saying that like we had a little bit of like prior with like New Mexico and Phoenix last year, right? There was precedent.
Yeah.
And yes, they delayed the game, but also they delayed the game to like 2 days later, and then they were like, you kind of have to play that.
That was crazy though. I mean, like, Phoenix had basically no senior players. Like, it wasn't like, oh, we have a short bench. It was like, it's like we literally have children working tonight. Like, that's, I don't know. It was just, it was, that to me is like,
it's a
that's
bad
a genuine
precedent, by the way. Like, the league shouldn't, I mean, there are questions to be asked about how all of this was handled, but
for sure.
If that is, it's a bad precedent, but it is the precedent. Sorry, Hartford.
And if the bar is you have to name 7 academy kids before we even think about canceling the game, like, then Hartford was nowhere near the threshold. So
now I wanted so badly that like Undertaker out of the coffin situation, Tab Ramos goes into net.
There was like a minor Twitter fire saying like sign Jeff Caldwell to a 10-day contract and get him out of retirement.
Oh my God.
Dude's like
that's Bill Hamid's music.
I mean, Jeff Caldwell is like in law school having to think about driving down to Tampa Bay and was just like, I'm not answering the phone call. Absolutely not.
Oh man.
I think Hartford ended up scoring first, if I'm remembering.
Yeah,
right?
they did.
Like,
They did.
It was a good game too.
They took the lead, yeah.
Oh well, it's fine. Let's go ahead and talk about what happened this week. Why don't we? So Tactics Show coming out tomorrow, talking about the game that we're going to talk about right now. Charleston versus San Diego. Charleston, good at soccer. San Diego coming down from their previous win high. And look, San Diego, they are really good on their day, but Charleston just seemed to be the perfect counterpunch to what they bring.
Yeah. Side note, I got to get better at like reminding Kaylor to post the Tactics Show. So that's on me.
That's also on me. I need to start setting a notification. I even thought this morning, Kaylor, you have a little bit of free time. And then they said, by the way, we have a fire drill and you need to watch 3-year-olds as they are trying to not die from an imaginary fire. And I was like, okay. And I totally forgot.
Brutal. Yeah, but on the field, that's a Charleston team who has now clinched a playoff spot, 3rd team to do so. They've won 4 out of 5. And like Fido Barajas has been off with the Mexico U17s a lot of the time. I think Declan Wynn is in New Zealand camp at the moment. they looked so assured with what they were doing defensively. San Diego's a team that's not afraid to possess the ball in pretty good positions for a lot of the game. And Charleston was confident enough defensively to let them do that, then counter pretty quickly. I was taking note of the Tristan Traeger brace on the left wing. He's somebody who was very good for Atlanta United too at the end of last season, kind of biding his time to get a look for the Battery. But he finished at a really stellar rate last season, and he's finally getting that touch again. I think things are really coming together at a good moment for Charleston, who started hot, had a bit of a midseason lull, and are figuring it out once again. Questions to be asked for San Diego in defense, as always, because they kind of never keep it together where they need to in the back line. But I mean, yeah, sorry if no Allen here to defend himself, but yeah, big one for the Battery.
Yeah, you mentioned Tristan Traeger, and I will say as a United States Military Academy graduate, there's never been a more Air Force Academy name than Tristan Traeger. But that being said, 2 wonderful finishes, and I do want to give a shout out to Pierre Reedy, who first half substitution because of an injury to Arturo Rodriguez. He's forced off in the 37th minute. Reedy comes on and has just an unbelievable dribble that creates the first goal. He won't get the assist for it, which is a shame, because he absolutely takes maybe 5 or 6 loyal players out of the game with this dribble, and was a menace like on the wing the entire night from his fullback spot, which they kind of shook things up shape wise like once he came on. But yeah, Traeger, those runs into the center of the box where he was like kind of popping up, I really love to see that from wide players, and to be so assured, particularly on the second goal where I think it was Crawford who actually crosses in. So both fullbacks like very involved for Charleston, which you'd expect from a Ben Pierman team. All that being said, just a really great game plan from Charleston, which smothered Loyal. They only allow 6 shots in total on the night. So just it was a great performance. I think overall good team performance for Charleston. And like you said, getting hot at the right time. They've had their ups and downs. This is going to be a season that they look back on, and there are some weird results in here. And I think they finally found their stride as a team, and they're really showing that there's not many teams that you'd rather not come up against in a one-off game right now than Charleston Battery.
We've kind of lost scope of the fact that Charleston was a disaster last year. Like, this team got 25 points all of 2022. And Ben Pierman being amazing was kind of the early season headline, but it deserves note that he is doing such a stellar job with that team right now.
Yeah, and it's not like he brought in a ton of ringers or something like that. He's done a lot with like just very shrewd roster moves to be able to build something really special. The Traegers, Ikazas, Markanich, like those kind of guys where they're not like all USL types of the past. And he's turned it into a really, really solid 11. And it's I don't know. It's building towards hopefully the Cruz Pierman playoff matchup that we're all looking for.
Please. And by the way things are going, you may be getting it because the Rowdies take down Lou City 2-1, where Lou City looked like they maybe they had it. Maybe they are really turning this thing around, and like they were going to get a result down in Al Lang. And then the Rowdies, after, a little bit of not having their coach and still not having the coach, they were like, wait a minute, we've played without a head coach before. Let's just win a game. And then they went and did the dang thing. And I mean, I think John might have mentioned it, or maybe it was Matt from Unused Subs. But basically, every Tampa Bay goal is we're sending it to Cal Jennings, and it's really fun. And that's everything with this offense is like, hey, forward up there, go score. And when Tampa Bay's running right, it just seems to work. It's so simple that it works, and it's always so fun. And I think at some point also with Lou City, we need to just get to the point and just outright say until the playoffs, this is not your normal Lou City team. And we need to stop being shocked that they're not picking up these points because they're just not the level that they kind of once were. That said, they're going to make the playoffs and win it all because that's what Lou City does. But, this is just not the same Lou City team.
I guess.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was just gonna say the two main things, and I'll let you take it. Like
Yeah, go
obviously,
for it.
Cal Jennings hitting his stride for Tampa Bay is in this last run of games where this is his 5th straight scoring. He's like, we always knew that he could be this sort of danger man for Tampa Bay. It seems like he finally is becoming that, which is so important for this team. This felt kind of like an old school Eastern Conference, like Tampa Bay Louisville game, in that it was pretty open. Both teams had like a decent amount of chances. It really felt kind of like that heavyweight bout that you really want to see from these sorts of teams. And from Louisville's perspective, I guess like my takeaway was the fact that they ended up open, which is just like in the history of Louisville, in this version of Louisville, they just are more susceptible to especially, I guess, like Tampa Bay was breaking at speed, and it seemed like they always were able to create these overloads and have numbers on the counter. And it was just constant where it's like Oliver Semley probably deserves almost like borderline man of the match. And if they had gotten anything from this game, he totally would have been up there, because there are three attacks in a row at the beginning of the second half from Tampa Bay that all could have resulted in goals. And Semley like keeps them out and keeps the game like semi-respectable. So all in all, I love this because it felt like USL heritage in a big kind of like this heavyweight sort of bout where everyone's trying to land these big knockout blows. And it's just not, to Kaylor's point, it's not the sort of match that you are used to seeing Louisville in if you're viewing them from kind of a multi-year view of, you're not used to seeing them be this open.
And just on the Rowdy side here, I mean, Nicky Law was out all week long for personal reasons. Then Stuart Dobson, who was taking over part-time as the manager, got a red card at the end of the Memphis game on Wednesday. So Tampa Bay was down to their 3rd coach, who was actually like the 4th guy to helm the team on the sideline this year. They had injuries to Connor Antley and Aaron Guillen in this game, 2 of their most important defenders. And they still come up with this mid-game change where you're really prioritizing the pace on the wings with Joshua Perez and Dayon Harris. And they were such a good complement to Cal Jennings. Jennings obviously is such a great goal scorer too, but the way that he links play, the runs that he makes, really enable you to get those outside in runs from the wingers. And the Rowdies were so taking advantage of that. It didn't help for Lou City that Wes Sharpie had to play at left back in this one. That's not his position. He lacked some of the pace you would have wanted, especially going up against someone like a Dayon Harris. I think Kaylor was right to point out that we probably can't be overly concerned until Louisville doesn't do it in the playoffs. Like, they've earned that level of trust, but they seem to have flaws, whereas Tampa Bay, every choice they're making right now is hitting in a real legitimate way.
Yeah. We're like a couple of red cards away from get what I wanted originally, which is just Leo Fernandez being a coach. Like,
by the way, Leo back in training right now. Like, he's coming. Yeah.
as the coach.
Well, right. He's getting his badges.
I mean, do you need badges to be like an interim coach?
No, but they make you look cooler.
Are they like Pokemon badges? Like, just put them bad boys on.
Can you imagine?
Like Emerald.
Now I wish that was a thing. If U.S. soccer wants to be serious, that's what we need to start having. Imagine
if you get the UEFA A, it's just a big like A, letter A in your chest, you know.
Well, I think there's a book about that. So let's go ahead and move over. Let's talk a little Switchbacks versus San Antonio, which I don't know how else to say it other than Colorado Springs is the most confusing team in the USL. Are they good? Are they bad? Are they somewhere in the middle? And it's not even a who are they this week kind of thing. I don't even know who they are. Whatever, but they get a great result against San Antonio, which is a must get for Colorado Springs, who are on a real death spiral into dropping out of the playoffs, who gets a much needed point in a carnage that is the bottom of the West.
Can I just say San Antonio hasn't won a game since August 16th? Like, they'll have gone a full calendar month by the next time they're on the field. That's a big deal that San Antonio fans, by and large, don't want to cope with right now, from what I've seen. Jordan Farr subtly not doing the incredible things he was doing to make that system viable, given some of the injuries they've had at back, given the fact that, I mean, they were missing both of their starting wingbacks this weekend to international duty. Alan Marcina plays such a hard-nosed brand of soccer. He manages the team in kind of a manner that's defined by like this brinksmanship, where they signed a kid on loan from the Portuguese First Division. He made one mistake 15 minutes into the game against Tulsa, and they just subbed him off. Like, he was completely healthy. What does that do for his confidence going forward? Somebody with a real track record of success in a league a lot better than the USL. Credit to Colorado Springs at the same time. They made some really interesting changes to kind of play with like one defender late on and really push for this game. I mean, hey, if you got like a James Musa and a Drew Skundrich in your back line, those are guys with fullback and midfield experience. Why not just throw them upfield? But San Antonio, I don't know, question marks for me right now.
Yeah, for me, this does fall down a little bit to, I mean, Oluwaseyi has lost a little bit of that clinical edge that he had early on. There's a version of this game where he has like a brace or a hat trick, and because he had some very, very presentable chances, especially early on, and just fluffed his lines, like didn't take advantage. That is a game changer for San Antonio when they rely so heavily on being, Alan Marcina's whole thing is being first and foremost defensively solid and taking your chances. Whether there's a lot or a little, you take, enough. And in this game, it was, I will say, Santi Patino's goal, breathtaking.
Dirty.
Just an unbelievable finish. And obviously, I, as an El Paso fan, do joke about San Antonio's sort of roster roulette, where they kind of just keep going back to the well in terms of like they're gonna bring back every former player.
Yeah,
they're gonna call up everybody who's available for loan. Like they are on Y Scout sorting by contract expired, and just like, is there someone out there for us at all times? And at the same time, like Patino back in this team, he's been providing goals despite the fact that the team is not providing points, I guess. And then for switchbacks, I guess the only thing I would say is that Echeverria is probably lucky to be on the field. That was like an orange card for me, like in that it was very borderline, like could have gone either way. I wouldn't have been surprised if the ref had shown red, just in the way that he kind of dives into that challenge, studs up. But at the end of the day, I mean, it is a cool story. And Marco Rios, 17 years old, gets his first goal for switchbacks and an equalizer in front of the home fans. There's probably something that, whenever you see or I guess it is the second goal of the season. It's not his first goal. So yeah, Marco Rios scoring again, 17 years old, establishing himself as a professional. And so cool storyline. And again, to your point, San Antonio, I would say, Kaylor, you said switchbacks are the most confusing team in the league. I would argue that San Antonio is also confusing because they had, similar to El Paso, I guess, like they've had some really high highs, and this recent stretch is really, really kind of baffling because they just haven't been doing what San Antonio typically does.
Yeah, I kind of mentioned it on Soccer Down Here this last week because we were talking about the international break and people being pulled away and stuff like that. And that kind of plug and place, like San Antonio brings in and just empties the reserves. I was talking to the guys over there and they were talking about which teams were going to be hit the hardest. And it was like Pittsburgh, Sacramento, and San Antonio were supposed to be hit super hard by the international break. And I was like, Those are like the three teams that can plug and place better than anybody else in the league, right? Like they have really good talent. When their talent's playing, it's really good, but also they can just plug and play. And that's just kind of what they do, especially Pittsburgh, obviously, how Bob gets results out of anybody ever. I'm almost positive he could at least make me a League One center back at this point if he threw me out there. How? I don't know. I'm just kind of convinced of it.
I think I want to push back on San Antonio plugging and playing right now. I think what Marcina does, driving everyone into the ground such that they have a 6-man injury list consistently, like every single week they're bringing in somebody from 2021 just because they need the bodies. Phil made a really good point about Tani maybe not being the hero we were promised. I mean, this was a guy who had 1 goal in 7 appearances across various forms of Minnesota United before joining the club. He had a hot streak. Now they're probably hoping that what they're getting out of Nathan, what they're getting out of Patino is going to be enough. Interesting to see. I don't know. I just, something about the vibe there is a little bit different compared to last season. Yeah.
I kind of have a double pushback on that though.
Sure.
And it's the fact that they started behind because they didn't start off with enough players to fill the roster anyway at the start of the year. They were starting behind the 8 ball and they weren't able to start rotating like they were last year. Part of what made San Antonio so good last year was that they were able to rotate everybody all the time, whether that was because like Maloney and Mitchell Tainer were getting red card suspensions and that kind of stuff. And that was their version of rotation. Or guys were just getting rotated. They were able to do that because they had so many bodies. Meanwhile, this year they didn't have enough players and they were having to run guys into the ground immediately. And now I feel like they were just never able to catch up. I don't know.
Yeah. I think we kind of agree in spirit here, but
yeah,
knowing San Antonio, they're going to come good, but I like to drum up the fact that they don't
for sure
like it. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. You also mentioned being on Y Scout, which is, I felt a little called out as that's what I'm doing to look at everything right now. I felt a little called out. But
hey, that's a paid service, so that's
it's so nice too. Oh, it's so.
I'll be on FB Ref making wild sweeping judgments.
That's right. I'm just on FB Ref and plugging that into Excel and hoping for the best here.
Honestly, okay, so I do watch the games, but I am such a visual. Numbers don't make sense in here if that isn't obvious. Alabama education. So like if you can give me pretty pictures, we're golden. And the USL website is confusing sometimes because half the time it works, half the time it doesn't. Sorry, USL. So we were going to talk about it. We're going to skip by it just a little bit.
It's a pretty picture right now. State of play in Omaha.
That is true. Listen. Omaha went from we were like, can we bring back Mims to suddenly they are by and far the best team.
Dom Casciato, 8 wins in a row. From John Hutchinson's assistant to the hottest property in League One. Union Omaha producing monsters. At this rate, he will be absolutely anonymous in 3 years. He will disappear. He will disappear into the ether.
Congratulations. I mean, what a way to go.
On the other side of this game, by the way, where they get that 2-1 win against Richmond, they also had the subtly crazy win midweek, but people going away. Where is Terzaghi? He's not been in the squad for Richmond in 3 weeks. And I'm asking that as someone who doesn't follow this team closely enough, but that's a big deal for them down the stretch.
Yeah. I think that's a big question, like where's Terzaghi? But also, like there was, not big conversation, like this sounds a little bit rude, I guess, but like he started off a little slow and people were like, wait a minute, if Richmond's going to go, they need him to go. And then he started going, they started kind of going, and then he just kind of disappeared. And the initial thought is transfer because that's how that normally works, or injury, right? And I wanted to go ahead and make this comment here. And I wish we could have done this at the top of the show because, people don't always get to this point, right? But majority of teams cannot release injury information because of HIPAA laws, right? Teams that are posting the injury list, and from what I understand, have it in their contracts that they can release injury information. And you say, well, why isn't the club being more clear? Because the player doesn't want you to know. And, that way, whenever that player goes to a new club and they'll be like, there's not a public track record of their injury. Obviously, their medicals are going to know that, but there's not public record of said injury, basically. And you're kind of hoping that the club doesn't do their due diligence. So there's a chance of injury, and he didn't sign off on his injury being released. There's a million reasons of where he could be, but you really do want someone who eventually just signed a new contract to stay in Richmond, if you're a Richmond fan, and being like, yo, where is this guy?
I'll probably mention it when we talk about predictions for my sad club, but I think in the interest of the expectation of not just the American sports fan, but like the sports fan in general, injury stuff, like whether or not you report on the specifics of somebody's injury, you should be able to communicate like whether they're close to returning, far from returning, like that sort of stuff. And when people say like, oh, he picked up a knock in training, when it's a straight up lie and they know that person is going to be getting a surgery that like ends their season or something like that, that's, to me, it's just dishonest for no reason. Like, there's no benefit to anybody really when it's like fans are expecting like, where is this player? What's going on? Like, why, what, like, what's, what is the situation? Nobody's served well by, oh, it's like day to day, or we're picking something, or it's a precaution when they know that it's more serious than that. Or there's something else going on and it's not injury related.
So now, someone who has read the CBA, like we talked about Turbo last week, so if like he somehow listens to this, correct me on this. When we were doing a little bit of a CBA pod at the beginning of the year, we're talking about Enzo. I read the CBA. I was reading it, trying to figure out what was going on, and I ran across this, and I could be misinterpreting, but my understanding of what I read is that clubs cannot just put in their injury report injury because it can be a lie, and it can also essentially not defame a player, but like if they put someone down as an injury, even though it was something else, whether it be personal or like the club has something against a player, it can also ruin that player's reputation because other clubs within the USL will just see that player was injured for like 8 weeks. And so it's a little bit of player protection, which, you can also get into the fact of what about the fans as well, of like in other clubs anyway, just seeing that player went missing for how long. Like if they're trying to sign that player, they're going to ask the question anyway, right? But that's my understanding of the CBA. I'm probably totally wrong, but that was my interpretation of the rule.
Yeah, I am not a lawyer.
That's
what I do know is that Omaha is good at soccer. I think what impresses me is that they're so effective at controlling a game without possessing the ball. In the double win week that they just had, with the huge one against North Carolina, the 2-1 against Richmond, they had, I think, 39% and 44% possession respectively. But the way that they pin the opponent back with the press, the way that Steven Dos Santos is such a powerful player in the hold-up phase of the game, they're never a team that's lacking for that level of control. They always are keeping the ball away from the dangerous areas. It's why the numbers can be a little bit misleading, because what Omaha does isn't focused on that. It's much more focused on the ends, and it is just paying off for them handsomely right now. They're such a fun team to watch because that system is just clicking.
For me, with them, and I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago when they were starting this hot streak, I can tell whenever I watch Omaha how it's going to go with Doyle, right? If they allow him to sit back deep and just play like deep lying quarterback, essentially, like that's just how you know it's going to work. And there's this idea of like this holding midfield, right? Where we talk about the holding midfield, which sometimes becomes another word for defensive midfield, all this kind of stuff. I started rewording it in my brain and just started calling the quote unquote recycling midfield. You have players that recycle possession. That is their whole goal, is to recycle possession, get ball, distribute ball. The ball goes back to you, distribute ball. It doesn't have to go all the way back to your center backs. It doesn't have to go all the way back to your goalkeeper. You have a midfielder that recycles, and that's Doyle for them. Now, Brewster, can't remember off the top of my head. I know it's one of the two. Brewer, thank you. He kind of did that as well because they went with that like 4-2-3-1 kind of shape in this one. And he was also playing that deeper lying player, but Doyle is still that recycling player. And even though they don't hold that possession very often, they choose when they want to hold it on. You talk about that press. He is a part of that reason, is because that front line can get forward. They can press knowing that they have someone back there that if they win the ball back, if they need to, they can get it to him, recycle, and go again. And that's how you know they're really going to be rolling. I really am impressed with Doyle. And whenever they set that thing up right, it's great.
Preach.
Yeah.
You have anything, Phil? Sorry.
No, I mean, yeah, Dom Casciato, next big thing. Where's J Mims? Where's Dom in a couple of years? So,
hey, that's okay. That's fine. I mean, I'm sure he'll take a championship or two and go on his merry way. Maybe, I don't know. We were going to mention Las Vegas and Oakland. I mean, there was a joke about how tomorrow you can become an owner of Oakland, but Las Vegas has already done that. But that also felt like a kind of a 3-for-1 joke, and I don't know if I want to do that for me today. So, but Las Vegas also already made the joke.
They did.
So, I don't know.
Yeah,
Whatever.
We've got bigger and better things coming with Las Vegas in the prediction section.
Do we? All right.
Big things.
Yeah, let's go ahead and go to that prediction section. And Las Vegas and El Paso. Las Vegas gets a 3-1 win over Oakland, which, if that just isn't symbolic, I don't know what else is. And it wasn't like they really broke down Oakland either. You have 2 goals that if you ask them to score it again, they don't. And if you're Oakland, you're just like, what's going on? And then you have El Paso, who, Phil, if you haven't listened to Seriously Loco lately, you're missing out. But I mean, it's a lot of what's going on. Like, we know what's going on, but also like what's going on. And I feel like these 2 teams are in weirdly the same place while having completely different perspectives of the 2.
That's maybe the meanest thing I've ever heard.
That hurts. That one stung. Vegas and El Paso are in the same place. You're not wrong.
I mean, it
just hurts.
They're
is all I'm saying.
streaky. I mean, listen, I understand that Las Vegas's streaks did not go as high as El Paso's streaks, and El Paso's streaks has not gone as low as Las Vegas's streaks, but they're both streaky teams that they'll turn it on for a game and you're like, okay, they've done it, and then they'll just kind of fall back, and it confuses me.
So what's the pick here?
Well, I'll start things off. Oh, are you starting or am I starting? Who's starting?
This is prediction, so Kayla needs to give me something here.
Yeah, it's true. Hey, Phil, for you, pal, I think you're going to win. I think it's El Paso.
Thanks, man. I'm locking Vegas, and here's why. No, I through this rough run for Locomotive, obviously the Hartford win notwithstanding, which barely counts. I have been locking El Paso's opponents in the hope that it reverse jinxes them out of this streak. And at the same time, I've been collecting points on the back of my team. It's been the one solace that I've had in the pick'em is my locks have been correct basically every time that I've picked against El Paso. No, I mean, listen, Vegas sucker punched Oakland. There's no two ways about it. Oakland were the better team on the night. Two really, really good goal, kind of quick succession goals, followed by a third banger. Vegas, for me, still don't really have it, but Locomotive against Orange County at the weekend, like, they were okay. And like, there were signs, I would say, Noah Dolenmeyer is up there for like one of the shrewdest signings of the season. He's the lankiest, goofiest looking center back because he's just a huge person that hasn't fully like grown into his body yet. And he looks like a really shrewd signing. And at the same time, I just can't see where El Paso's goals are coming from. Gomez and Zacharias up top is just like, Gomez is the only one who looks likely to make anything happen. Zacharias doesn't have like the technical ability of a Lucho to be able to play in that striker role. Castician looks absolutely shattered. He hasn't made a positive impact on a game in probably a month and a half. I think his last goal was against Tampa Bay. That was probably 2 months ago. And Petrovic, unused substitute in a goalless draw. That's a bad sign for me. Lucho and Yuma, to the point on the USLPA or the disclosure of injuries, they haven't made the 18 in now 4 consecutive games. Neither are listed on the injury list. To me, there's something there. I don't know if it's basically both of them are essentially like announcing their retirement and winding down. I don't know if they're on their way out. I don't know if there's been a falling out with the manager. All that is complete speculation. But the bottom line is Lucho going on this cold streak, not having any really goal scoring form, and then disappearing from the team for the better part of a month. Something's going on there. And there's just a lot in. Basically, El Paso's gotten better defensively than they were in the worst part of this run. And I just don't see where the goals are coming from. So, yeah, I'm locking Vegas. Sorry, that's a long road to get to I'm locking Vegas.
I want to I don't want to cut you off real quick, but I just wanted to talk about, because I did talk about this on Soccer Down here too. And I said it preseason when I was looking at El Paso's roster. I believed in the back line. I believed in the defense. But I thought that the attack was super thin, and I was like, if there's an injury, I don't know where the goals come from. Something I didn't think about was, what if they just get cold? And it feels like that's exactly what's played out. And when your attack gets cold, and there's injuries here and there, obviously, but when the attack gets cold, no one's scoring goals. Your back line's under constant pressure. That back line that I think is still the best part of this team is left out to dry, and that's just kind of where we are.
Yeah, I mean, Phil kind of captured all my thoughts. Tough when you have a game where you don't force a single save of the opposing goalie in that last one. I picked Vegas here. I'm also thinking of just like boycotting this game's existence because it's at 10:30 Eastern on a Wednesday night. So that's disgusting.
I'm such a sicko. I'm gonna watch it. Like that's
same. But
that's the problem. Like that is the level that we're at now. Like,
well, we say as we're an hour 10 into a podcast about this darn league.
Yeah, we're probably not the people.
Sicko behavior. Yeah, we're not the benchmark.
Yeah, we're not the people. Let's quickly move on to New Mexico versus Indy. New Mexico, who maybe feels a little hard done by of not coming out with a point in Birmingham, but also was completely manhandled at the same time. Just, one of those where it felt like they should have gotten a goal if it wasn't for a good save. But they also didn't really create enough to cause a win. And then Indy, they're still just kind of flying right now. Like Indy looks really good. I think that this one's pretty straightforward. I think this one's Indy. New Mexico is getting the Miami treatment from me, which is until you prove to me that you can win like two games in a row, I'm not going to believe in you. And Indy has finally gained my trust, so I'm going Indy.
Yeah, New Mexico bad, so I picked Indy to win. That's essentially it. And I think Lowry is going to relish a trip to Albuquerque as well. So just with the history there, so. Yeah, I think Indy win it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Eric Quill got the game pretty wrong in Birmingham. I think he can't decide what he wants, maybe tactically, a game in and game out there. Bit of a tough challenge for Indy coming off of 13 days of rest, then going into a good crowd and a weird baseball pitch atmosphere. But ultimately, I think the 11 are going to win this one pretty comfortably.
It doesn't help that New Mexico doesn't win at home. The thing that blows my mind about New Mexico is not even just the fans or the baseball pitch or the condition of the pitch. It's the altitude. No one ever thinks about the altitude of Albuquerque.
The altitude doesn't actually make that much of a difference. Like,
tell my lungs that. I was fighting for my life, dude.
No. I get that. I'm just saying, like, looking at the numbers of their home games, Colorado Springs home games, and talking to some people, it's less of a thing than it would be for like us normal humans.
Yeah, and I did talk to some players after they went to Albuquerque and like Colorado Springs, and like they are taught how to deal with it, and they're always trained to do it. But it's like you would think that could be like a sneaky thing that gets you, but it just never does. And I mean, you would think with it compounding, like the altitude plus the fans plus the pitch, it should be indomitable. Like they should never lose there. Whatever. Let's go ahead and move on to San Antonio versus Tampa Bay, which, hey, we could be seeing this one later on this season if things go right. Oh, don't make that face, Phil. I have to hype this thing up somehow. But this is a fun matchup because I think a lot of fans have been wanting to kind of see this matchup anyway. It's a fun one. Does San Antonio get their first win in a month? Does San Antonio get their first win in a month? Does Tampa Bay continue to play really well without a head coach? Or I guess Nicky Law will be there by then. But, what happens? I think since I'm going to say my thing right away, I think I went with San Antonio. It's at home. That's kind of how my brain works. San Antonio at home, that they win, especially against a high-profile opponent like Tampa Bay. Their fans are going to bring it.
I went for a draw. I think this one, Tampa Bay for me is definitely the form team. I mean, obviously, and San Antonio come in a little bit on the back foot. Travel, always tough. Playing in San Antonio, not easy. And I think Tampa Bay's goal scoring, despite the fact that they have been doing enough, obviously, I'm not like, I don't know. I think San Antonio holds firm in the sense that they probably snatch a goal. I'm going for like a 1-1, so I think they probably snatch a goal somewhere and Tampa Bay equalize at some point and probably push on for the win. Like they'd probably look the more likely to win, but this one just has draw written on it for me in the South Texas heat.
Yeah, despite the fact that I did my little San Antonio doubter thing, I've got a draw here. That's a tough situation to go into. Tampa Bay still has those question marks in defense. If Antley and Guillen aren't right, maybe they sit anyway because you don't want to test them on the road. It's kind of put up or shut up for San Antonio, given that it will be a month since they've won. So I think they at least get a draw here.
Yeah, let's go ahead and move on. Let's stay out west, and we're going down to Phoenix. And we have Phoenix versus Detroit, where I so want to pick Detroit. I cannot force myself to do it, but they look good, and I like what I'm seeing out of Detroit. And I think Phoenix is going to be shocked by the back line that they're going to get, especially if Bryant and Alma-Mensah are just going to be scoring goals, if that's just what they do now. So good luck, Phoenix. But I also think in a weird way, the possession game that Phoenix plays does fit really well into what Detroit wants to do. But this is not the same counterattacking, we'll let you have possession Detroit team that we saw at the beginning of the year and all year last year. So I'm going with the Phoenix win solely because it's in Phoenix. If this was in Detroit, I am going Detroit and I would have considered locking it. But in Phoenix, I'm taking Phoenix. And if they haven't found each other already, this might be some of the most toxic like Twitter streets we're going to be seeing all year long, and I'm kind of here for it.
I went Phoenix as well. The home field advantage, I think, plays a big part. That's not to take away from what Detroit has done, which I think they've adapted well to their situation. For a long time, they kind of tried to play a certain way or create a certain way, and they have kind of defaulted to, hey, we are gonna be like sharp on set pieces. We're going to try to do some creative things to get people involved. And so the bottom line here is, I think, it's not to take away from what Detroit's doing. Phoenix has been much improved in terms of, when you're looking at this like long term from last year into this year, they've looked more consistent. They've provided some better results. And I think they get the job done against Detroit at home. But very different prospect playing Detroit now versus earlier in the season.
Yeah, I just like how Phoenix matches up here, honestly. I think Arteaga and Trejo, in addition to whoever makes the third there, I suspect they might go with Fede Varela on the left side just because that gives a different challenge with Trejo on the right against Amu Mensah. Varela probably has more space if he's sinking down a bit next to Bryant. In any event, no matter what they go with, the way that they engage their fullbacks, they're going to have some 5-on-4s going against that back line. I liked what Detroit got out of the Ruts and Maxi Rodriguez midfield combo last week. I don't know how sustainable that is going forward from a defensive sense. So leaning Phoenix here, but I think Detroit is realer than I've given them credit for much of the season.
For sure. And another team that we, have talked about being real but has stumbled lately still has been North Carolina, who gets a win in their most recent game and was involved in one of the craziest League One matches, which says a lot considering League One just exists against Omaha. They drop points there. Going against a Tormenta team, which, we'd started the show with them. We love them. We adore them. But they're not the same team that they were last year at all. And they're going against a team in North Carolina that's figured out how to score goals again. And that's not what you want to see if you're Tormenta. I'm taking North Carolina. I think that it's going to be scrappy. I think that I wouldn't be at all shocked if Tormenta comes away with this because I have Sterling good. Just blanket statement, throwing it out there. But also the attack that North Carolina can put on that Tormenta backline, which is not what it was last year, I don't think they're going to be able to withstand.
Yeah, I went for a North Carolina win, especially being at home. And I think like the last time I was on, we talked about the fact that, hey, Tormenta's been involved in a couple of these like crazy matches, maybe haven't had the best luck. Since then, they've been beaten by One Knox and Northern Colorado back to back. It's not to disparage either of those teams, but it does just detract from like, is this, I think we're deep enough in the season now where we can say this Tormenta side just isn't what they were last year, to your point, Kaylor, versus them being unlucky or maybe not getting the rub of the green. So yeah, I think North Carolina take care of business after what was a pretty crazy last week. Or last couple of matches. I think they maybe settle things down a little bit against Tormenta and get the win.
Yeah, North Carolina for me as well. And I think it's largely because they're the better team here. They have a very well considered attack. Tormenta, the defense is in tough shape right now. They've given up 2 or more goals in, I think, each of their last 7 games, I want to say. They've only got 1 win in 6. They're getting what they want out of guys like Keziah Sterling, but they just can't figure it out pretty much anywhere on the field. So that kind of leaves it for North Carolina.
I mean, we're going to be wrapping up the show soon, but I guess my final USL thought is, if you're going to have a good back line, be wary of the poachers that come for them. Look at Richmond. They were built off that back line. Yes, Terzaghi was great, but what made Richmond so good last year was that back line. What made Tormenta so good last year was that back line. And for Tormenta, the championship came in. They kept plucking players out of the championship, kept taking players. Joshua Phelps goes back over to Australia, and he's proved to might have been the most important piece of that team last year that went super under the radar. And I know we talked about that center back pairing, but maybe there was a certain center back that was really doing the business for it. Richmond, they lose their entire back line, essentially, not all of them, but pretty much everything that made them special. And so I think if you're a League One team or a championship team for that matter, but especially League One, if you are built on that defense and you can run it, you got to hold on to those players tight unless you're going to let them go to a higher level, because it has decimated some teams this year. But do we have any final USL thoughts for the night? No.
I can think of.
Am I the first person to lock Vegas this year?
I hope so. Unless Kaler did it.
That seems like something I would have done at the beginning of the season.
It does.
For sure.
It does seem like. I want to share this because I just got a DM from one of my Seriously Loco co-hosts because I was talking like, "Hey, on USL show," and he's like, "Just pick Vegas for your lock and call it a night." And so he knows me well. So shout out to Christian. But yeah, El Paso's down bad. That's all you need to know right now about my final USL thoughts.
I need to ask Ryan. I want to know if anybody's locked a draw yet, because some of these just seem so painfully like it's going to draw that I want to know if anybody's done it yet. I'll ask Ryan.
I think not.
I mean, your staunch anti-draw policy, it would make sense actually that you would be the first to lock a draw.
Last game of the year. I'm going to do it for the USL final.
Lock it going to Pens.
Oh, we had one. We haven't had one go to Pens yet. Anyway, we're getting all sorts of all over the place. We got to get out of here. Final thoughts for the night, John.
Yeah, I feel like Phil tweeted this morning, "Today's a blaze," but I'm into the new Olivia Rodrigo album a lot.
Yes.
I feel like it's just me like hanging on to my youth, but it bangs.
Beautiful. Phil.
Yeah, the Olivia Rodrigo album absolutely slaps. Yeah, well, for those on video, I'm wearing a hat of my new obsession, which is Formula One. So this is I talked about it last time. Alpine, I bought a hat and they immediately dropped an absolute clunker in the Italian Grand Prix. Finished, one car didn't finish, one car finished 17th out of 20. So absolute nightmare after the first one I watched as like with a rooting interest, they ended up on a podium. So this is the up and down that I've signed myself up for. And it is a welcome distraction from what's going on in Locomotive. So like I'm realizing that I think I was looking for something to, help me through the rest of this USL season. I'm praying that Locomotive figure it out in time to snag a playoff spot in this absurdly huge playoff. But even now it's looking a little bit of a daunting task. So we'll see.
Right now I'm in the middle of the process of deciding, do I want to watch Legion play in Rio Grande or do I want to go watch Peso Pluma? And it's a real conversation I'm having with myself. Do I want to watch a game in Edinburgh or do I watch Peso Pluma? And it's a real hard question.
Never the Toros. Sorry to Dash Shattenwolf if he's listening.
It's fine. Yeah, that's a conversation I'm having with myself because I'm like, I don't know. Some of my high schoolers at no school I taught at this year were playing Peso Pluma, and I'm like, yo, this kind of goes hard. And then they were like, oh, they're coming through, they're coming through Birmingham in September, and I'm like, we might be doing it. So
Why not?
we'll find out. We'll see. Yeah, I think that's about it. Look, again, it's fun as always. We love chatting. Alan couldn't be here today. But everyone, if you made it this far, go on Twitter at ILM_Ryan and tell him congratulations on getting a job.
Yes, we love it.
Yeah.
So tell him congratulations. Do it. It's an obligation. You have to. So thank you all so much for listening. And even though he was not able to join us tonight in a very echoey room somewhere in California, here's Alan.
Thank you for watching another episode of the USL Show.
The USL Show is now proudly part of the Protagonist Podcast family. Please go to protagonistsoccer.com to check out more work. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see everyone again next time.